And here's my reaction back to this article. Nothing to do, get real. There's always something to do. Get away from the go nowhere crowd. Get away from the lazy ones. Get involved in your culture. Get involved in sports. Read a book. How about this one? Clean up your home and yard. Say you got nothing to do? How about go get a job? And don't do the crime if you don't want to do the time. And if you do a crime, you better do the time. And you also better realize that if you have a criminal record, a lot of companies are not going to hire you. If you have a criminal record, you're going to disqualify yourself in the ability to support your kids or your family because a lot of companies will not hire you. Get your kid off the couch. Bill Gates, everybody knows who Bill Gates is, right? He's got some lessons for youth. Rule number 3, you will not make $40,000 a year right out of high school. You won't be a vice president with a car phone until you earn both. Rule 4, if you think your teacher is tough, wait till you get a boss. Rule 5, flipping burgers is not beneath your dignity. Your grandparents had a different word for flipping burgers. They called it opportunity. Television is not real life. In the real world, people actually have to leave the coffee shop and go get a job. Last rule, be nice to nerds. Chances are you'll end up working for one. This article came out in BC just this past year. Talked about the high suicide rate in one of the First Nation communities in the province where I come from. Again, it gets back to employment. This young youth said the reason why we have a lot of suicides in our community is because there are no jobs. The more and more I read into this, it reaffirms why I focus on creating jobs and making money, and why I feel this is what First Nation leadership has to do. I think jobs can help reduce suicide rates. I think all these counselors we have in our communities, drug and alcohol counselors, youth counselors, all of these counseling we spend tons of money on. The most important type of counseling, again, is employment counseling. A different kind of hunter today, our elders are telling our people. Aboriginal teens should become hunters for jobs, education, hunters for business. Mining jobs, forestry jobs. I think creating money is what's going to get rid of poverty in our Aboriginal communities. It's never too early to teach your kids about money. I don't think enough Aboriginal people have respect for money because most of it's this funded money. It's not something you went out there like an entrepreneur and had to work hard for 8 hours a day. Every entrepreneur I know of doesn't work lazy band office hours. Every person that works in business works weekends, evenings, shift work. There's financial skills, bring them to your community. This is the role of parents. Prepare your kids for work. Get an education, get a career. Native grad rates are on the rise in our territory and most territories across the country. Native graduation rates are rising, and that's awesome. But the other thing is in most reserves, over 50% of the people don't live on the reserve. And that's obvious because there's not enough jobs on the reserve, so they're moving away to the cities and to the towns. And often they wind up in poverty in the cities. Again, That's why I'm proud of the Sioux Indian Band and other First Nations across this country that are focusing on economic development. We're now creating jobs for your people where your reserves are not. I'm proud of the fact that we employ First Nations people from Saskatchewan, Alberta, all over BC, as well as the Yukon. They come to work on the Sioux Indian Reserve. I want to see a band put up their hand and say, hey, Clarence, we're employing some of your youth on our reserve. That way we get back into intertribal commerce. Intertribal commerce, to me, is the way of the future. Women in business. Awesome. Women are outperforming males when it comes to Aboriginal business. Again, it's the women that are being the real warriors in Indian country. Education is our buffalo. I feel weird going back and forth here. Usually I have this sitting right here. Finding the right job requires a lot of work. I'm going to run through these quick because we've got another speaker coming up. There's mentoring programs. Get involved in police programs. Through Indian Eyes, I sit on national boards at the federal level. I sit up boards up in the Arctic. They're all around creating jobs and making money and getting the corporate Canada, the oil companies, the diamond companies, the mining companies to respect Aboriginal title and rights and to incorporate Aboriginal mentorship programs in their business. As I mentioned, gotta read. You want to call yourself a leader, you better be able to read. Today, leaders are readers. Here's some books that should be in your bookcase. The sad fact is, most Native houses I go in, they don't have a library. You come into my place, you're going to be seeing one of the biggest First Nation library collections there is. My bedroom is full of Native books. The other half of my book collection is business books and self-help books. Here's a quick read of some of the books I think you should be reading. I spoke in Australia twice. Even down there, they're finally having First Nation economic development conferences. This is a good book to read. Your success is your own damn fault, right? Choctaw Revolution, Mississippi Choctaws, one of the richest bands in the States. This band in the 70s was totally broke, and now it creates thousands of jobs. Thousands of non-Native people go to work on this res. And they're putting together a language program that's the best in the U.S. Billy Dime and James Bay Cree has a book out. They signed the first modern-day treaty. And he said economic development is the key to extending Native rights. Russell Means has a book out. He says Indians don't want welfare. It's dehumanizing and it's degrading. Here's a good book called On the Res. Talks about that res politics that I had a slide about. The backstabbing that occurs on every Indian reserve. This book just came out, Dances with Dependency, written by a Native lawyer from British Columbia. It's an awesome read. He talks about the fact that most program funding on Indian Reserve is for dependency programs. It's never too old to go to school. If this lady that's 60 some odd years old can graduate, to all those First Nation dropouts, you can go back to school and graduate. Even on my reserve, we've had people go back to school in their 30s and 40s. And one of these days, I hope to go back to school and finish my degree on Native American Studies. When I graduated when I was 18, like most Native youth, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know I had to work. I know I had to get a job. And I know I didn't want to work in those fields anymore. I went out to Saskatchewan and then to Alberta to the Native American Studies program. And at 18, I was writing term papers on land claims and treaty issues. That's my area of study, is the res. Aboriginal people are wanted in trade industries all over Manitoba and all over Canada. Native talent can solve the looming labor shortage that the federal and provincial governments talk about. All these non-Native baby boomers are retiring. And what exists out there on the reserves is 50% unemployment and above. I tell the federal and provincial governments, engage the Aboriginal people. You don't need to go overseas and bring in foreign workers. We got good workers here amongst the Aboriginal people.